Okay, so hi and welcome back to Venture Bros, a Venture Brothers podcast. I think I like that full title better. Venture Bros, a Venture Brothers podcast. It's nice and wordy.
It's a good chunky soup of a title.
Yeah, it's the best. I am Bryan Dressel. With me as always is Nick Friedemann.
Hello.
Nick Friedemann the Great. I'm gonna go with Nick Friedemann the Great.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Who knows what next week will be? Maybe it'll be Nick Friedemann the Awful, or the Terrible, or the Forgotten. Ooh, I always like Forgotten.
Any name that could be attributed to a king in like the 3rd century, I'm all for.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to try to go for every week for you until I forget, which Perfect. Might be next week. Who knows? So this is a podcast where we talk about every episode of Venture Brothers, and we do a nice little review of them and a little bit of memory lane walking and all of that good stuff. This week we are talking about episode 1/2, Dia de los Dangerous, which is technically the 2nd episode, but realistically the 1st episode of Venture Brothers. Nick, do you remember when you saw this one?
I think it'd probably been, I mean, like I said in the last episode, I started like in basically the middle of season 2. So whenever I bought both DVDs at the same time, which ages this story, but season 1 and season 2. And so I probably started at the beginning and just went all the way through. Yeah,
that makes sense. I think I saw this one right around the time it aired, and for some reason it didn't just grab me. And I didn't have cable at the time, so I didn't really have an opportunity to go back to it. But I remember seeing a few of the episodes in the first season before I walked away and then came back to it when you and I became friends.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I think that's kind of... It might have been this one, it might have been a different one, but I really remember the opening specifically.
Yes.
And that's where we'll start with this thing.
It's a great opening.
The opening of this episode, like, it sets the tone perfectly, like, for everything in the show to come. Like, it could not be better.
Exactly.
And everything from like how so we'll tell you what it is a little bit in case you haven't seen it or don't remember it, but the episode opens with a poker game with Brok Sampson and others, and you don't really know what the others are other than that they're probably in Mexico or Spain because they're speaking Spanish. But there is a luchador there, so you kind of lean towards Mexican, and it looks like a very serious, horrifying scene, and then it just gets more like silly and ludicrous the more the scene goes on, and it could not be better. Like you find out like partway through that it's not just them playing poker, they're playing strip poker. Like,
it's like, yeah, which is inexplicable. Like, it's something that never occurred to me how weird that was until I was just watching it.
Yeah,
for this podcast. So I was like, why are they playing strip poker? Like, what is the purpose of this? And it's just for the silliness of it. That's all it's for.
Oh yeah, like it's really the only reason they're playing strip poker is for the reaction to him standing up and whipping out his dick and having the guy
exactly
applaud. Like, that's the only reason they're playing strip poker, which I think is phenomenal.
It's the best.
I love that. I love I think starting the show on Brok Sampson was such a smart way to start the show, especially because it's about the Venture family, and he's, family, not family. People will argue back and forth on that to the end of time. But he's just such a great intro to the show because he kind of embodies every aspect of the show. Like, in my opinion, the Venture Brothers character is Brok Sampson.
For sure. And to go off of, like, your point very quickly, I also think that, like, they really set up kind of the actual sense of humor of the show as well. So it's not just, like, him pulling his pants down and showing his glorious penis. It's also the fact that he basically fights all of these luchadors and all of these other, like, kind of henchmen around there, gets down to the guy with the ponytail who's clearly the leader of the situation, and the guy gives up, like, immediately. And it just sets up the whole idea of... Yeah, people just cut their losses. Like, there's no point in, like, fighting to the death. This is, like, not the same kind of idea that you thought it might be.
Oh, yeah. Like this is not... Especially if you'd seen the first episode. Like, this is not the same show. Like, this is...
No.
Like, the difference in quality from Turtle Bay to Dangerous is night and day. And I think it's mostly solidified in that first scene of, like, this is the action we want to do, this is the comedy we want to do, and these are the characters we want to do it with.
Exactly.
And then moving forward, I don't remember. Again, I watched these episodes yesterday. I don't remember exactly what the next scene is, but right around the next scene is Dr. Venture giving his speech to the wrong classroom.
Yes.
And like just again, right out of the gate, Dr. Venture is incompetent. Like he's obviously a smart person, and they never question whether or not he is intelligent. He's just very stupid while being intelligent.
Exactly.
And it nails it right out of the gate with him giving the speech to the wrong class.
Nails it right out of the gate with that, and then immediately after that, he goes to the seedy doctor, and he says something I feel like really sums up his character very well, which is he's very intelligent, but at the same time also very dumb, where he's trying to bribe the doctor, and he goes, "Would President Benjamin Franklin convince you of anything?" Benjamin Franklin was never president, which is the best part of that, but you just gloss over it. Is that he's just like, oh, like, he thinks he's smarter than he actually is, and he is intelligent, but he definitely thinks he's smarter than he is.
Oh yeah, and I like that he knew enough to not say President Alexander Hamilton,
yes,
but did still say President
President Benjamin Franklin. Ugh.
But I
so
love,
dumb.
And you have like these thinly veiled, like he's not a racist person, but he's very insensitive to race and racial issues, and like they nail that right out of the gate with like, oh, the crazy dead people Christmas you guys have here, which is going on right now.
Yeah,
it's like he's very awkward. Like he is the best at shoving his foot in the mouth at the worst possible time.
Exactly. But I think that we hit on something that we didn't really bring up in the last episode, but does apply here, which is that the joke is always on him. And I think in the last episode, the pilot, is that the joke is at other people's expense. And it's like, no, like the joke should be about how ignorant he is. And I think that's much funnier as a general premise than, him being okay.
Yeah, and like one of the things that I will always love about this show versus every other show on TV, like I said, this is my favorite show of all time. There's consistency with his stupidity. Like I feel like in lesser shows, say for example, The Office. I don't know why that's what I'm going to, but The American Office. Michael Scott starts as an intelligent doofus. By the end of the show, or the end of his run on the show, he is just a doofus.
Exactly.
And they just kind of threw out all the intelligence and just went for the laughs. With the Venture brothers, they never lose that he is smart, not as smart as he thinks he is, and the joke is always on him. But he still evolves as a person, but his comedy, or like his points for comedy, are very consistent.
Exactly. I think the best way to sum him up is that he makes a lot of bad assumptions.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
He never really does the research that he should because he never applies himself, which is a constant theme of the show, is that he has the tools to be something of like an actual scientist that he feels like he should be, but he never applies himself.
Yeah, never.
Never ever. There's like this is jumping the gun, and I know that we said we wouldn't compare it to other episodes, but there's another joke later on where he's like the Debbie's Little Whorehouse in Texas, where he thinks Dolly Parton's going to show her breasts. And it's just like, it would just be a simple Google search. Like, why? It's so dumb. It's so dumb. But that's exactly what his character is.
And it's so, like, Brok even tells him that's not what it's not going to be what you think it is. And he's like, oh no, don't spoil it for me. Oh my God. And then moving out of Dr. Venture, then you get into the Venture brothers, who are immediately more well-rounded and just kind of stupidly fun characters.
Exactly.
Like they go out
don't. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I love the intro of like, we bought these big hats, sombreros. They're just.
It's like, oh, cool. Like it's just like that's the reaction that you should have to them. But I think that they also established, which they don't really. I think in the pilot is that Venture has no interest in them at all as human beings or anything. Like they're just there. They're always an annoyance.
Oh, totally. He basically cannot stand his sons.
He pays them to go away. Of course he can't stand them.
Like, later on, you kind of get the feeling that he wants Dean to be more than he is, but even then, like, I don't remember where it is. I believe it's in season 6, the most recent season, where it's like they need to find out, he needs to have whatever is the thing he holds closest to his heart near him, and then even Dean wasn't that answer.
Yes, exactly.
It's like,
Ugh,
and the
what
show
a
does
terrible father.
He's the worst, and they set it up from the very beginning. It's like, here, take this money and go away. And the boys are just so sweet at this point. Like their response isn't let's go buy crazy shit. It's like let's beef up Helper, and they give him a flame job and give him a crazy horn to blow. And it's just
exactly. I think this is the intro to Helper too. He wasn't in the pilot. I just realized.
Was he not in it at all? I thought he was.
I don't think he was. Maybe he was. I don't know. That pilot's pretty forgettable.
It's aggressively forgettable.
Yes.
But like either way, like this is such a better intro to him if he even was in the episode. Like
100%.
He's just such a cool guy. And then like I don't know why I'm referring to Helper as a guy, but he is. And then like the later on in the episode where Dr. Venture gets his other kidney stolen from him, it turns Helper into a walking dialysis machine.
Yeah.
I even took a note because I love that the tubes keep coming out of him because it's such a like hatchet job of getting this thing done. And whenever the tubes come out, Dr. Venture makes the best noise of this.
It's the best. And you know that they recorded like 16 takes of that too, and they were like, we'll just pick the 3 best ones and we'll just put them in for the random parts where this happens.
It's so gross too. Like the tubes come out, they're just flailing and blood's going everywhere.
It's the best.
Other things in this show in this episode that I think are just completely amazing is the intro to the Monarch.
Yes.
Like the Monarch is wonderful in this thing, and there's plot lines that they completely abandon after this one, of the training of the henchmen where you get your wings. The only character who doesn't have his wings at signing up is Speedy, who then dies in this episode without ever getting his wings.
And it's heavily implied that he never would get his wings. So.
Oh yeah, that poor guy was never going to make it. And I love that. Like when they're like, "Oh, where's Speedy?" He's like, he met with Brok Sampson." Like, oof, yeah, that happens.
Yeah, and it's like I don't even need to hear the rest. Is the answer, and you're just like, But I love that they set that up too, because your introduction to Brok Sampson is this like incredibly strong killing machine, and then they keep basically like reiterating on that and building on that. So his introduction is he's getting a part for his car, I think, is why he's playing strip poker. And then basically finds a prostitute, goes to have sex with a prostitute, and then finds out that the boys are in trouble, so he goes and just takes like dart after dart after dart, which they imply are all lethal, it seems like, or at the very least meant to knock somebody out. And he is just like taking it, and he grabs Speedy by the neck and then gets hit with a truck, and that's his introduction basically for the first third of the episode. It's exactly what Brok is, like, to a T.
And like, and don't get me wrong, there's parts in the pilot that did this very well, but like this one, it's just, and then like he comes back to life, or basically comes out of his way too many trank coma, and like he's only not mad that they tranked him 1,000 times. He's mad that they hit him with a truck. It's like,
exactly.
Like he just, the way he picks and chooses the things to get angry about, it's just like, yeah, it works.
It's perfect. Not upset that a chupacabra was hiding out in the car. He's upset that they hit him with a truck. That's all that matters to him. Because he views it as some sort of dishonor, I guess, which is also right up Brok's alley.
Oh, yeah, like, he could run into a barrage of bullets, and he's like, well, that was his choice to run in the barrage of bullets. Hitting the truck was a step too far.
Exactly. I kind of miss Speedy. Like, it's, like, such a great character to introduce as this, like, very ambitious henchman, which they don't really ever go back to, and I think because it doesn't really make sense as, like, an arc for a character, because I think you'd just be frustrated with it. But as a one-off character, I love Speedy. I've never forgotten Speedy.
Oh no, and like I think that's why they brought him back with 24 that one time. Like when 24 visits 21 as the ghost, and he's like, "Oh, Speedy!" And it's like, because people remember Speedy. Like he was such a one-off, but such a great one-off.
On his death is perfect. Like I love there's one thing that they do throughout the whole show, and I love that it started basically with this first episode, is Brok's strength kind of doesn't, or I would say his competence and his strength doesn't really make much sense. Like there's some stuff that just they introduce that are very cartoony. So the thing is, he's squeezing Speedy by the neck so hard that it pops the glass in his like little goggles out. That doesn't make any sense at all, but it's so funny. And it's so dark, and it's so, like, odd that that's Brok, like, to a T.
And I love it. They did such a good job in the early seasons, and like this episode is a great example of it, of like how crazy violent he is, that later on in the show, when they stopped animating that, they got like angry complaints from fans of like, what happened to Brok Sampson? Why isn't he as badass as he used to be? And if you can find the video when somebody asked, I think it was either Jackson, I know it's Jackson or Doc, but the reply was amazing. I'm just like, well, we've done it so many times. Like, how many times can we keep doing it? You just have to assume that Brok is still out there ripping the heads off of people and then shouting through their vocal cords, "I'm you!" And it's like the funniest response possible to a question at a convention.
Exactly. I think it's from Comic-Con. From like a long time ago at this point, but
it's either Comic-Con or one of those. But I remember it was the convention where they revealed that they're aging the boys, because that's why I was watching all of those. Because after they killed all the clones, I'm like, what are they going to do next? And they're like, we're aging them, and it's like, oh wow, that's a bold step. But we'll get to that in a whole bunch of episodes from now.
Exactly.
So what are the other things that you loved in this episode? Like this one, I honestly think is one of the stronger ones of the whole first season, which is saying something, because the first season I think is phenomenal.
Absolutely. Well, I think obviously I think Brok is the star of this episode. I think it's hard not to be, because I think that they really realized that Brok was probably one of the funnier, stronger points of the pilot, and they're like, let's lean into that. But it's just Brok and Dr. Venture kind of having their own separate lives, which I actually think is one of the stronger parts of the show, and stuff that they do really well is they are a family, but they're like a broken sort of family. Like they all they all lead completely independent lives. And I think that part of that makes it good is that Brok does his own thing, Dr. Venture does his own thing, the boys do their own thing, and then it kind of converges. And it converges in this like bizarre, violent montage of him running over other henchmen, and Dr. Venture kind of like saves the boys, kind of, but not really. It's just all Brok.
And it's one of those things where, like, it's just set the tone of like, that is, if you look at it, I mean, for the most part, most episodes kind of follow that structure. And it's not till much later in the show where like the boys start leading their own separate lives away from each other.
Exactly.
But in the beginning, it's a lot of that. It's the Venture, like Dr. Venture's doing something, Brock's doing something, the boys are doing something, and then how do they all meet at the end? And this one did such a great job with just like, it's such a better intro to the Monarch, with the Monarch accidentally acquiring the boys. Like, did not mean to kidnap them, but now has them. And the whole subplot of Dr. Girlfriend not wanting to have kids with the Monarch, but being okay with him going and being a dad to those boys, is like, it feels so out of character for her, like where it is now, but it's still like, it's such a fun sequence of like, no, you go be the best damn dad you can be. And he's like, okay, I'll go wrestle with the boys. And they're trying their damnedest to kill him, but they're the fucking boys, so they can't do anything.
They're completely useless.
Oh,
now, I actually, now that you're saying that, I also really like that they set up Dr. Girlfriend? Yeah, Dr. Girlfriend. I don't know why, because I guess I'm used to, like, later on, she's like Dr. or like Mrs. Monarch, Dr. Girlfriend.
Dr. Mrs. the Monarch, yeah.
Dr. Mrs. the Monarch, that's what it is. But they set her up as this, like, she also has her own life, but they actually have a good home life, which is like very interesting in contrast. Like, it's something I don't think I ever really picked up on until obviously they flesh it out later, but they had that from the very beginning. Like, they actually it seemed like a competent and good couple. Obviously they're quote unquote bad people, but they seem like they might have a much better relationship than the actual protagonists of the show, which I think was done very strongly done on purpose.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's really fun just like watching them interact. Like they have this like weird sort of very romantic love to each other that, like, as the show goes on, you can see more of the inner workings and just how insane they are. But at the root of it, and for an introduction, they start in this very kind of humble, like, oh, we just support each other and each other's decisions, and my husband or boyfriend wants to be a supervillain, so I'll sit next to him and I'll be supportive. And they have all these wonderful things that later get expanded on and are just that much more entertaining. But because the show, or this episode, does such a good job introducing them in a very small way, like a very like microscopic, like, here's one aspect of the relationship that works. It allows them to use the building blocks of that to make the relationship that much more crazier and fun as it goes on.
Exactly.
I think that's kind of why I love this episode as much as I do. Is it's just such a smart episode. It's just so well written. It's entertaining. It's just.
Well, it reminds me a lot of what actually the pilot. This is essentially the pilot. If we're being honest, like I think that like the Turtle Bay is not really like a good introduction to the show. This introduces like the idea that you have super scientists, that you have these villains that kind of are not against the super scientists, but that there's like a weird rule set about it. Like the fact that like he doesn't kill the boys, he's just kind of waiting for the dad to come and pick them up, more or less. Like that's the implied game of the whole thing. But they also establish that the world is supernatural. Because if they didn't do that in that first episode, I'm not sure how you would introduce it later. And they do it in both pilots, actually, but this I just think had a better intro, which is the chupacabra, and then Brok kills it very quickly, and he's like, chupacabras, they're all over Mexico. And you're just like, okay. And it's just a throwaway thing, like that this is just normal. Like this is not something new.
It's only a half throwaway thing, because Dr. Venture's original speech to the kids was all about how chupacabras aren't real.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. It does have like a payoff. But it's like that's, I think, important because the show is very supernatural in a weird way, and they kind of start to give rules to that supernatural part of the world. But man, like the fact that they introduce all of that stuff pretty fucking seamlessly is amazing, honestly.
Yeah, it's easily one of those episodes that you can turn on and enjoy, and then just like, oh, I really like this show, I'll keep watching it. And then after you get through, like you get up to date with the most current season, or even if you finish, like, say, the second season, you go back to this one, it's like, it's crazy how much ground they cover in 23 minutes. Like, how much, like, world building is just there. And the interesting thing about it is that there's all this world building, and they're not even at the Venture compound. Like, they're not... even at the place where the majority of the show will eventually take place.
Yeah, you're right. That's crazy. I didn't think about that. I guess it is all. I mean, obviously it's animated, so it's not quote unquote on location, but that's more or less what it is.
Yeah, I mean, the Venture compound is almost a character in the show until season 6 when they moved to New York. Like there's so many things that they just don't know about it, and it keeps getting crazier and deeper and more intricate and insane. And the first episode that most people saw has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Wow.
And I don't mean that as a negative at all. I actually kind of love that, because it's exactly what we were saying earlier, where the show was so obsessed with its world building that it kind of forgot about its characters, and not in a bad way, and not entirely, but in a way. And this one was like, for the intro, it's like, these are your characters in this world. So it's kind of... It set it up enough to where they could do all the world building throughout the rest of the season, and you still know who these people are.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, that is like a really, really... It's very rare, I feel like, for a first episode to be this coherent. Like, and know really what it is. Like, it has a lot more confidence in itself than the actual quote-unquote pilot did. Which I think makes sense, because he had like a year to kind of like work on it and finesse it, if I'm remembering the dates that you read correctly.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, that's, again, if we're wrong, let us know. But that's based on the IMDb air dates, and they say the first one was February 16th, 2003. Dia de los Dangerous is August 7th, 2004.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge difference.
It's a year and a half, basically, to really work out, like, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and just slowly get something that's this strong, I think really works. I mean, honestly, what's crazy is I don't think that you'd have a network really take a flyer on that now.
No way.
No way. Because it was like a pilot that was just okay, and then you have this second episode that really needed the pilot to kind of understand what worked and what didn't.
Yeah, and then like, I'm just on IMDb now, and like, you just go through the rest of the season. It's like the rest of the season is so solid that it's like, if they had given, say, I'm not sure how they pitched this one to Adult Swim or how they even delivered it, but if they had basically gone proof of concept, this is what we want to make, here is our pilot, great. This is our script for our second one. Oh, well, if we give you the money to do that, I bet that would be amazing. and that could be kind of what happened. Again, I don't know.
Probably. But there's so many story beats that are very similar. Like, if you kind of stack the two on top of each other, I think it's, like, very clear that they looked at the pilot and they go, we could do this but better. And I think that makes sense.
It'd be like watching A New Hope followed by Force Awakens. It's like, okay, so this one just is newer and has more money behind it, but they're basically the same thing. Obviously, A New Hope is a significantly better film. Don't go insane. But this one's the opposite.
Exactly. It'd be the other side of that coin. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, too, because I wonder if... I really... At this point, I do think... Because I asked you this last time, but I do think they actually had the plan for what they wanted to do with the dreams, which they also reintroduce here.
Yep.
But I also think they had a plan for most of the rest of the world, because they do allude to some of the rules of the guild in this. I don't think they ever name the guild necessarily, but I do think that he had established kind of like what the rules of the guild were and what OSI was and that kind of stuff. There's no proof in the episode of this, so I'm not going to try and like claim that this is fact, but I do think that there's like a definite idea of a stronger sense of what that world is, and the guild, at least, I am positive was figured out at that point.
I have a feeling that both the Guild of Calamitous Intent and OSI were, even if they weren't named at that point, like if Doc and everybody hadn't come up with that yet, I think the groundwork of what they were going to be was definitely in place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they say OSI or the Guild in this, but
no,
I think you're right. I think this is clearly they had a bigger plan at this point, and then moving forward, it's just a very carefully executed plan.
Exactly.
So I feel like we've talked pretty much everything that there is to talk about in this episode. Is there anything that we haven't hit that you really particularly like?
The only thing that I would mention is I always love the sight gags in this show. So the sight gag of him wiping the blood off of the windshield, which is like with the windshield wipers, I loved. It's like anything with a sight gag in this show, I always think is the funniest thing.
All right, well let's call this a segment, because as anyone who listens to After the Hype knows that I love my segments. We'll start finishing every episode. What was your favorite moment in this episode?
Perfect.
And would you say yours is, because mine would definitely be the Venture Brothers trying to kill the Monarch. Just him thinking that they're just, all right, boys, yep, we're playing. They're just like, they're trying their damnedest, and they're just so worthless.
They're so useless. Mine would either be the thing that I mentioned already, which is him squeezing Speedy's neck so hard that the little like glass pops out, or it would be the windshield wipers wiping off the blood, which I also love.
It's so good.
So good.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we didn't mention in this thing.
No, I don't think so. At this point,
were 21 and 24 named in this one yet, or no?
No. There definitely isn't either named. They do the voice of, and I always fuck 24. Up who's 21 and who's 24, but the one that sounds like Ray Romano, somebody does that, Doc does that voice.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But it's like a one-line thing, so...
Yeah, because Doc Hammer did the voice of Speedy.
Yes.
Yeah, it was definitely him, because he did, but they were just Henchmen 1 and 2.
There you go.
Yeah, so obviously very different back then. But yeah, that was clearly his voice, and he became a character later. Or they wouldn't have remembered who Speedy was.
So 24 definitely is the one that after Speedy dies, he's like, that sucked.
Yeah. But yeah, that was everything I had for this one. Again, I just love this show. I know that's going to get tired of saying it at some point here in this thing, but I really do. So next week we will be talking about the third episode, which is, in my opinion, I know I just said this one might be my favorite, but I think I was wrong, because the next one is the one that I quote the absolute most out of almost any show in the entire franchise, easily the entire first season, and that one is Careers in Science, because that episode is just phenomenal, and I'm very excited to talk about it. That's it for this one, though. Nick, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
No, because what I would, I guess, plug, I can't say, so...
Which, yeah, that doesn't frustrate me at all.
Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry. Eventually, you'll find out.
Eventually, I'll find out what game you're working on. But
yes.
Until then, I'll just stay annoyed. For us, I will happily plug After the Hype, which is the feed that you are currently on. So if you liked this one and you want to keep listening to my voice, move over to any of our most recent episodes, or check us out on the website you might have found us on, which is athpod.com. That's it for me, though. So with that, I will say thank you, everyone, for listening. I'm resisting the urge to scream "Go Team Venture." I might start doing it at the end of every episode. Who knows, right?
You could. I'm not going to stop you. I'm like a continent away. So no, I'm not. I'm a country away. Oh my god.
A whole country or continent. Why not?
Oh, Nick, you're so stupid.
Yep. Okay, so thank you, everyone, for listening, and bye.
Bye.